Ted Hahs, and we're having a series of conversations. I'm with my friend Tracy Hutson and Adrian. I'm sorry, Adrian, help me out here. How do you pronounce your last name?
Tirtanadi.
Tirtanadi, who runs Open Door Legal. And we believe in hope. We believe in restoration. And we've been talking with a series of people who are doing really innovative work, helping the poor, helping the less advantaged, and in innovative ways. And Adrian's one of those. I'm a big fan of your work with Open Door Legal and your approach and your dream of universal access to legal aid for everyone. So Adrian, why don't you just start telling us your story and let's have just a natural conversation and see where it goes.
Thanks, Ted. I mean, I've been told I have a very unusual story. You know, when I was in 7th and 8th grade, my family had this paper encyclopedia, right? The World Book Encyclopedia. And I just kind of read it and would memorize sort of income tables for countries around the world and including the United States. And then I basically went and found my parents' tax returns, found our income, and was like, wow, we are very well off compared to the average American, the average person in the world. And I asked my parents, why is that, right? And they were not necessarily pleased with this line of questioning. And started down a long road where I just became very convicted that it was my sort of personal responsibility, my moral responsibility to work to address poverty in America. And so when I went to college, I studied kind of systemic poverty. I worked in the field in community development for a couple of years. And eventually I had this thesis that legal aid was this sort of least resourced, most cost-effective way to address poverty in America, and made a business plan, went to law school, and opened Open Door Legal 2 weeks after I got my license. So wow. It's been an interesting journey, to say the least. Our first year, 2013, was the first year we opened. We had a budget of about $35,000. And we've grown a lot. This year, we're up to a budget of about $5 million a year, 45 staff. Really what we're trying to do is pioneer the country's first system of universal access to legal help and show that when everybody can enforce their civil rights, poverty will be dramatically reduced.
Wow. I love that you had this vision as a young man and you really stuck to it. What are your parents saying now?
They say they're proud of me.
Yeah.
You know, I was just a very unusual child, let's say.
Sounds awesome.
Where did you grow up at?
Suburban Maryland, outside of DC.
How did you end up in San Francisco?
Yeah, so when I was reading the encyclopedia, I also made a list of all the major US cities. And then decided from that list that San Francisco was the best city in the country, and decided I was going to move out here. So actually made a mixtape in around the 10th grade, all songs about San Francisco, and I just play this on a loop. We really drove my family crazy.
What's so funny about this is I can relate, but I wanted to be a basketball player. You know, like who at age 7 has this encounter and they want to eliminate poverty? And then figures out the path so intentionally. That's really cool.
Yeah, a lot of research, you know. You know, I guess I felt like very socially marginalized as a child. So I think that kind of plays into my story and where my heart is. But yeah, I've never met anyone quite like, you know, that where they just kind of read about the data and they're like, oh, this is what we're gonna do with my life, you know.
And so if you could tell us a little bit, I mean, this is all fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. That's so fun. I have 2 teenage boys and sadly they are not reading world encyclopedias, and So I don't even, I had some as a kid as well, but I think that I should bring some in just for nostalgia's sake, even that everything's on a screen these days.
Well, now it's
Yeah.
Wikipedia. Yeah. and
I
you
know.
have more
Now
access
it's
to it.
Alexa.
Yeah.
She
Yeah,
can
they
tell you
just talk to.
anything. But I just absolutely love this story. As a young man, driven, going to make a change in the world. Now you find yourself so based in San Francisco. Is that where your entire staff is? You say you have a staff of about 45. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a couple that are remote, but 95% are in the Bay Area, and probably half live in San Francisco.
And how do your clients come about? What organizations are you working with, or what outreach do you have to let people know that these services are available?
I mean, we do a lot of direct outreach. About 50% of clients come through community referrals, so usually neighbors.
Mhm.
And then about 40 to 45% are referrals from other social service agencies, as well as from the city government. And then some people discover us through direct outreach as well. But in Bayview, which is the neighborhood where we started, at this point, we've represented about 5 to 10 families on every block.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
5 to 10 families on every block. So
yeah, on every residential block in Bayview.
So basically, you're universally known in Bayview.
Well, I mean, people still come up to us and say, they didn't hear about us until X person told them. So yeah, we could still do more to increase their community presence, but it does go to show the kind of depth of the problem we're solving. It is not hard to find people that need this kind of assistance.
And what law, ranging from every legal issue possible? So if it's financial, criminal.
Yeah, so the best way to think about it is we're trying to build almost like a general hospital, but for justice issues rather than health issues, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't specialize in any one area of law. We practice in over 35 areas of law. We don't do things that the public defender will do or where there's already guaranteed representation. But, everything from wage theft to discrimination to evictions, slum conditions, immigration status, deportation defense, child custody, domestic violence, elder abuse, estate plans, just to name a couple.
Wow. I'm sure you've seen a huge impact on these lives directly, obviously. Like if you're in these crisis situations, just to have some counsel and to be able to get that advice is priceless.
Yeah, so research says you are in the median case, you're 5 times more likely to win your case if you're represented with essentially the same facts. So, if you're a domestic violence survivor, you're 5 times more likely to get custody of children for the abuse to end. If you're a worker, you're 5 times more likely to get your back wages when they've been withheld. If you're a renter, you're 5 times more likely to stay in your home. So it's a huge delta in outcomes for a relatively simple intervention. And our big innovation is essentially to show how losing all these cases essentially contributes to poverty. It essentially means low-income people are losing billions of dollars in assets and earning potential because we're not providing legal help. And in fact, according to the World Justice Project, we are literally dead last among high-income countries when it comes to access to civil justice.
The United States is dead last?
Yeah, so every other high-income country, it's easier to get help, for example, in domestic violence or in evictions or in any other civil matter than in the US.
Wow. That's incredible. It's sad.
Yeah, it's very sad, and it's not the only stat that we're dead last in, but it's one we shouldn't be dead last in. Um, uh, Maybe you could share some of the stories, like case studies. I know I remember some of the ones you shared with me that were quite inspiring about a woman who was evicted, and you were able to show that it was illegal. But maybe share some of the case studies.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, at this point, we have thousands of stories, so it's kind of overwhelming, right? But I'll name just two that have stuck with me. So one was a woman named Claudia, who legally immigrated from Guatemala when she was a teenager, living in San Francisco. Ended up in this very abusive marriage and was assaulted about twice a week. One time the police were called, but then her husband threatened to basically burn her father's car and call ICE on him. And so she dropped the charges. Another time she was like hospitalized because of the abuse, but the police weren't involved in that incident. And this continued for 8 years. They had 2 children. And one day her husband calls the cops and says, "My wife has hit me," which wasn't even true in that case. But regardless, the police came, they arrested her. She spent 5 nights in jail. When she was released, she was given this restraining order that prevented her from going home. So she couldn't get any change of clothes. She couldn't see her children. Her husband locked her out of the bank account, so she couldn't get any money. So she ended up homeless in San Francisco. She was living in her car. She had this trial coming up on whether or not she'd be allowed back in the home. Tried to get help, went to 4 different agencies across the city to ask for help, and they all turned her away. They said, they didn't have enough funding, or it wasn't the right kind of issue that they handled, or they were low on staffing. Sort of walked by our street sign in Bayview 3 days before her first hearing. We just totally desperate, right? Like bawling and desperate. And we ended up doing a 3-day trial on her behalf. We got her sole custody of her children. We got her back in the home. We got her husband out of the home. We got her child support. We got her divorce, even though her husband tried to hide the community assets. And she was never hit again.
Wow.
And she was able to re-enter the workforce, remain stably housed.
Chills. That's so good. That's amazing.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm still in touch with her today. And according to one study, actually, it found that civil legal aid was the only intervention associated with a reduction in domestic violence in a community. But yeah, for people like Claudia and thousands of women, they find it very, very difficult to get help.
So how do you get paid? Tell me explain your business model.
Something like 80% of our clients earn less than $35,000 a year when they come to us. And so the services are all pro bono, which means, we have to raise money to provide these services. At this point, 2/3 of our funding is coming from the city of San Francisco, and then 1/3 is privately funded.
Through fundraising, or you have, just
right, fundraising. Yeah, so mostly individual donors.
And then the 2/3 from San Francisco are through grants and funding that way. The legal jargon that I don't know that you eat, sleep, and breathe.
I'll share one more story, if that's okay.
Please.
This was a story for Ms. Pobre, Teresita Pobre. She was also an immigrant, came from the Philippines in the 80s. And with her husband, they bought a home in San Francisco in the mid-90s. Unfortunately, he unexpectedly died 6 months later. And so she had to raise their kid as a single mom in this house. And for 25 years, made the mortgage payment. Actually, she had to invest more than half of all of her income into the mortgage. And she got older. She worked as a cleaner, and work became harder to get. Around 2019, she started missing payments. The bank immediately moved to foreclose her on the property. They never told her about the foreclosure, actually. She actually learned about it when her neighbor said, "Oh, I think your home's been sold," and the investment group that bought it had moved to evict her. So that's when she came to us. And what we discovered was that the foreclosure had been done illegally. The bank lacked, the best part I forgot to mention is the bank then sent her a check for 1 penny to represent the combined equity in this home. And it had been worth over $800,000 at the time it was sold for $50,000 to an investment group.
That is insane. What's even the point in that? Just to add insult to injury? I mean, there's no real reason. Sorry, like, just poor thing. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So she basically, she fell behind, but she thought it'd be okay because she had saved up like $750,000 in equity. But the bank then sold the property for $50,000, which was 1 penny more than the outstanding principal, to this investment group, who then, and then they sent her the check for 1 penny, and then the investment group moved to evict her, right? So she was very, very close to being homeless along with her daughter. So we discovered that the bank lacked the legal authority to foreclose in the first place and filed a wrongful foreclosure action. Eventually, this was in litigation for many months, but eventually we're able to settle, put title back in her name, get several tens of thousands of dollars in damages, pay off the outstanding principal, and actually pay off all of her credit card debt, and also reset the taxes, which was this whole different ordeal. And then we wrote a trust so she could pass on the home to her daughter. So she went from being almost homeless to being able to pass down a roughly $800,000 asset.
Wow. That's so amazing. I know. That is awesome.
This is just a detail, but in a case like that, is there anything punitive? Like, does the bank then, are they at fault? Do they have to cover the legal fees or anything like that? Or?
Yeah, so in the American legal system, there's very few fee shifting, right? So if you win or if you lose, you generally don't have to pay the other side's legal costs. So that's a difference from, like, say, Britain. In terms of punitive damages, very, very, very rare, almost never enforced. Yeah. So the main cost to the bank is, they just had to spend legal fees on defending this, and then they lost. But it's, what's really sad is, according to one study, roughly 84% of all foreclosures are done with a major legal violation. So compliance is very low, and because people can't get legal help, banks can just get away with it, essentially, expropriating people's value, sort of over and over.
And they're not doing that to the wealthy people. They're doing that to the poor people. Oh, heartbreaking. I have another question. Unpack more, like, okay, so you're obviously taking a huge pay cut to live this lifestyle, to pursue this. You could be, as a lawyer with your brains, you could be, in a whole different class. And, now you have to raise funds. Some of it comes from grants from the city, but a lot of it is this burden you're carrying, to fund this nonprofit organization, which is very inspiring. I think it's wonderful. But unpack more the business case for this, because you're actually saving the money, saving the city money. You're creating wealth. You're helping all of society. So you're actually making a whole lot of money for society, I guess. So unpack that more.
Well, first I want to say I don't consider myself underpaid or have taken a pay cut. I feel very blessed by the salary I get actually, and I'm not even in the same labor market as people working at a law firm, because I would never do that, right? This was like my calling, you know. Um, um, but yeah, I think investing in justice is so important. It's foundational. You know, when we go to developing countries, you know, this is what the World Bank says, you know, invest in justice, infrastructure, at a minimum, so that people can enforce property rights, you know. But, you know, the way our legal system works is in the US is if you can't afford an attorney, as most low-income people can't, you functionally don't have enforceable property, contract, or family rights, you know. Um, and this has a huge cascade of effects, right? So one effect is an increase in the cost of emergency services, right, and the cost of relief services. So one study in New York actually found that every dollar invested in legal aid reduced the public costs on emergency services by about $4. So these are police services, health services, shelter services. You know, you can think of someone like Claudia, you know, the high medical costs the system would have had to bear because of continuing abuse, the shelter costs the system would have to bear to house her, the psychological costs to provide the appropriate psychotherapy to her and her children, likely the cost to the system for dependency if the children were taken away, and as well as the police costs to continually respond to these incidents, versus the like literally $3,000 we spent to just represent her and resolve the issue, you know. Same thing with Ms. Pobre. You know, she was entering advanced age, started to develop signs of dementia. If she had lost her home, she would have needed to go into permanent supportive housing, which is very expensive for the city to provide. You know, we spent a little bit of money to not only keep her housing, but ensure that she didn't lose, you know, $800,000 in equity.
Yeah. And be able to give that to her daughter and
Be able to
relieve
give it to
herself
her
of the
daughter.
debt crisis that she was, you know, trying to just survive on. That's incredible. But yeah, when you hear those numbers, I mean, Ted, I'm sure you're having the same reaction. It just is so upside down. It's so upside down. It just, I mean, how obviously with, you know, your business and the outreach that you're doing, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing some momentum, but what do you foresee in the future? How can this be implemented, and what needs to pass? What laws need to pass? Where do we go so that this is something that we can all lean in on?
Well, the funny thing is, for our work to be effective, we don't need to pass any new laws. Like, all the laws already exist. The problem is it's impossible for low-income people to enforce them because we as a society have decided essentially to not provide legal help, right? And we're the only Western country that does this. You know, we've grown a lot, as I mentioned. We've had over like 150x growth in 8 years. Our goal in the next 2 years is to finish scaling citywide, make San Francisco the first city in the country with universal access to legal help, and then a sort of national replication program. Eventually to show that injustice is the heart of poverty, and change how people think about poverty and how we deliver justice to our neighbors.
Yeah. I mean, a statistic I heard, you know, years ago was, and I forget what the number was, so it's a poor example, but basically half of the nation is one paycheck away from poverty or losing their house. And it's just to realize how, first of all, how how hardworking people really do struggle just to make ends meet. And then when something catastrophic like an accident or a death or abuse in Claudia's situation, it's just, there's not enough in the reservoir to pick up your bootstraps and keep on moving, or family to rely on, or especially
with Claudia is a great example. If most attorneys are going to charge $400 an hour, if she's locked out of her bank account, exactly how's she supposed to be able to pay for that?
Right.
If Miss Pobre, if she had money, she would have just paid it on the mortgage, right? And it can share a lot more stories, but basically the system cannot create fair outcomes if people don't have legal help.
Well, to me, every time I talk to you, it's just so educational, and it's like it's tragic because our system was built around lawyers. Our system was built around representation. That's why you're saying, you're 1/5 as likely to win your case with the same facts if you don't have representation.
Yeah.
And then to not provide it and to not recognize that how skewed this is going to be. It's like, we need to change. It's pretty much obvious.
Yeah, I'm often asked, like, oh, how come this hasn't been done before? This seems so obvious, My main reflection is, Americans just have this very deep-seated belief that that everyone is treated fairly, And if you assume everyone's treated fairly, it's really hard to see how people will need legal help, right? Because you have to admit the possibility that some people are going to be treated radically unfairly, And I think that has really, really stilted our investment into making our justice system accessible,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the anecdote is a good dose of humility. And I prefer to think that let's just embrace the truth, where we're at, and whether we're good or bad, this is where we're at. And the point is that we can create in America a place where everyone is treated fairly. But until we're willing to acknowledge the truth, we're just going to keep banging our heads against the wall and wasting money and living in this illusion and tearing everybody up.
Yeah, so there's some disbelief, when I share stories and statistics with people. A lot of people have trouble believing it's true, but essentially compliance with our laws for sort of actors that deal with the poor is very low. One study found that 2/3 of low-wage workers experience wage theft every week. But it's almost impossible for them to get legal help on these cases because they can't afford an attorney, and because they are low wage, the damages are typically very low, right? So
and this is from their employer. Sorry, Adrian. So they work a certain hours and they're just not paid, and they're like, what are you going to do, basically?
Yeah.
You said 2/3.
Right.
The majority.
Right. Every week.
That's insane.
And the cumulative cost is massive.
So one estimate is that roughly $50 billion is stolen in this way from low-wage workers every year in the U.S. economy, which is roughly 3 times the total amount of combined sort of property theft in the U.S. And
because they're undocumented. Sorry, Adrian. What's the biggest incentive? Yeah, they're just, along with not having legal counsel at their, being able to afford it. Is it because they are not U.S. citizens primarily?
No, they're mostly citizens. It's just you can't get legal counsel, so you can't enforce these laws, right? So if I'm a high wage earner and I'm not paid, I can pretty easily find an attorney to represent me, let's say on a contingency fee, meaning they get a cut of the damages. But for contingency fee to work, you essentially need about $50,000 in provable damages, to make economic sense to be represented. When you're a low wage worker and your damages are based off back wages, it's much harder to get to that number, right? So what happens is, typically workers will get told to file a claim, and in California, it's called the Division of Labor and Standards Enforcement, which is like this administrative agency. Now, this administrative agency takes about 2 years to render a final judgment. The judgments are typically not enforceable, and the DSLE doesn't help with collections. So only about 17% of workers who win their case at the DSLE are paid any money at all. After 2 years, yeah. So they have to file, they have to win, and only 17% of those are paid.
What percentage win?
I'm not sure. So if you have an attorney, you would basically never file with the DLSC. You would just go straight to Superior Court, or you would negotiate right immediately. So, we typically win our wage theft cases, let's say in 3 months, get a settlement or a small claims judgment and move on,
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever lost a wage theft case.
That's incredible.
But because of the way deterrence works, because most workers will never get a lawyer, most companies are never punished for these wage violations,
right?
Or they're punished so rarely that they actually make more money by violating the law, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
What do they say in Silicon Valley? They say that culture trumps strategy. And then they say, but incentives determine culture. So like, as soon as you have an incentive and you make more doing something a certain way, that's the actual policy. Whatever our policy is, what are we incentivizing? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same again with foreclosures. 84% of foreclosures are done with a major legal violation. When banks do foreclose on the property, there's no legal requirement that they sell it at a market rate, right? So that's why they were able to sell it for $50,000 to this investment group. So why aren't homeowners
selling it for 50,000?
Yeah,
you don't know, or
what?
What is the bank's incentive for selling an asset that's worth 800,000 for selling it for 50,000? What's the incentive there?
So the bank's incentive is simply to recoup its outstanding principal, right? So their outstanding principal is 50,000. They have no incentive to sell it above that, because whatever they sell above that just goes to the homeowner, right? And they could care less. The investment group wants it as cheap as possible, because then they're going to make more money when they resell it.
So it's a deal between, right? I see. It's just like, sell it to you for pennies, and then you make money, and then we can all go on a trip.
Right.
Yeah. We can join the golf.
Yeah, but again, like, I'm just using these two areas of law as examples. You could really make the same analysis with any area of law, child custody, deportation defense, evictions, etc. And again, I've argued this is a huge underappreciated cause of poverty in America.
Have you written a book yet? I'll buy it. I want a signed copy.
I know. I want to watch a TV show. I just want to look around and be like, yes, what Adrian said.
Have not written a book. Thanks for the encouragement. I was thinking, maybe some point in the future, sitting down and writing something. I did write a white paper, though.
I'd like to read the white paper. Yeah. Okay. Can you send me a link and I'll share it with Tracy? And I'm assuming the white paper is public, right?
Well, I just finished it last week. So
congratulations.
Yeah. So it's not published anywhere online, but I'm happy to share it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, wow. Cool.
Please do.
We got 15 minutes left. Do you want to share another case story, or do you have a quick one that comes to mind that you want to share? And then we want to wrap up with what's next for you. How can we help? I mean, Tracy and I are fired up. How can we help you? But whoever's watching this, how can they help?
Yeah, I mean, oh wow, there's so many options, right? On cases. I mean, is there something you guys are interested in?
All of it. I mean, yeah, the deportation laws, I think, have just clearly, I'm sure, even through, you know, at the term of our last president, our prior president, there was a lot of shift there. I'm sure that was a huge one. And the custody law is,
Okay, so one immigration case from last year, which is very interesting. So there was a family, they came here, I believe it was from El Salvador, but it might have been Nicaragua. And they all came together, right? And came straight to San Francisco. And about 6 months after they got here, they were brutally assaulted. And ended up working with the police, and this qualified them for a U visa, right? Where if you work with law enforcement, you can get status through a U visa. So they were all able to get sort of what this like temporary U visa, and then it was coming up for renewal, and the son had a complication. So after the assault, his mother sent him to live with a family member in Texas. And while he was in Texas, he got arrested for smoking pot. So when the U visa renewal came up, the organization that was assisting with the renewal found out about this arrest. He was never charged, found out about the arrest, and then terminated him as a client because they said, this case is too complicated for us to handle now. And they terminated him 12 days before his U visa was due. So they said, you need to go hire a private attorney. And the mother works as a cleaner, as a nanny, really didn't have money. So furiously, Googled, where can I get legal help?
Yeah.
Found us, and brought the son in. And it typically takes, let's say, 2 to 3 months to do these applications. We had to write to the courthouse in Texas to get all the records. We were able to get it, package everything, created like a 50-page, I think, packet, sent it in, and got his U visa granted. The whole family's U visa granted. And now they're legal citizens or legal permanent residents of the US. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing was, we told this story at one of our galas, and someone from my church saw the story and was like, oh, the mother, she's my nanny. No idea this was going on. Right?
Oh, poor thing. She kept it private. Yeah. That's so wild. That's incredible. With like a week and a half left to go, right? Like, it's go time.
Yeah. So again, when you're a citizen, your earning potential shoots way up. The number of jobs you can take is much higher. And it is really good not to be separated from your son, also.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these families separated recently. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, immigration law was very difficult work under the Trump administration. They would constantly change policies with no notice.
Right.
But hopefully things will stabilize now.
Yeah. Right. Just a little glimmer of hope there. But yeah, I'm sure it was a moving target for a while.
Adrian, how can we help you? How can people help you? I know, but what's your website? I mean, you're saying a third of your income comes from private donors. So
opendoorlegal.org. org/donate. It's impossible to scale this out without capital, right? And sometimes donating is the most impactful way people can help. So we really cannot discount how important it is to have reliable revenue that enables us to do these services and provide justice to people. And I would say, if you have time and you have relevant professional skills, please volunteer. opendoorlegal.org/volunteer. We accept volunteers not just on the program and direct service delivery side, but on the non-program side, such as software developers and marketers and people in public relations and financial professionals. We're also looking for board members. And then I would say just help spread the word. You know, I love giving talks and talking about what we're doing. I'm very excited about it. And I'd love to give a talk at your place of worship or business or social group or basically wherever.
Yeah, happy to spread the word as much as I can.
My mind's racing. So if you're watching this, invite Adrian to come speak at your group. Okay. And he can speak to small groups and he can speak to 10,000. So, and anywhere in between.
Yeah, never done 10,000, but I am.
Oprah Winfrey, when you're watching this, invite Adrian onto your platform. He can share, interview him. He's got a powerful story. Ellen, he'd love to be a guest on your show. Yeah, I loved your response to when I said you've taken a pay cut if you'd pursued a professional career. And I love your immediate response. I don't feel that way. And I think the joy that comes out and the meaning and the purpose is, you know, that you can, money can't buy that. And I love that. I see more and more people either called to legal area or actually in the legal field. And that's how I see this replicating. People saying, even right now, like someone in Texas, you're competitive. Okay. Say, no, wait, we're going to make our city, we're going to beat San Francisco to the punch. We're going to replicate his model, you know, let's get holy competition here. And I see just a new generation of legal influencers coming up and saying, listen, you know, this is the truth. We're not where we need to be, but this is America. We can make it what we want it to be. And we can become the place. We can, you know, become #1 in access to legal aid, and we can actually address the justice. And it makes so much sense all around. So.
Absolutely. And it's the justice of it all, right? Like everyone deserves to be heard and there is a right and wrong. And just to have an advocate and counsel is, I mean, again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And it's such a pleasure to you. When's your next gala? Do you have them once a year or?
Yeah, we have them once a year. The next one is going to be in May, end of May. It's been virtual because of COVID. But that means anyone can join from wherever they are and just hear some of the stories of cases that we've been working on. We've got some great cases that we're going to, and client stories we're going to be able to share.
Beautiful.
Great. Thanks. Other stories than what you heard on this this interview. So
endless stories.
Share that information as well, so we can, you know.
Okay.
With the group.
Yeah. Where do they find out about your gala? opendoorlegal.org.
Well, our registration page isn't up yet, but yeah, it'll be on our website.
And I'm sure you have a mailing list, right? So people can sign up to be on your email list. And
yeah, we've got an email list and you know, the whole shebang.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Pleasure.